Okay, welcome everybody. So welcome to our review of a workshop hosted by the African Journal of Emergency Medicine. I'm the publisher of the journal. We are delighted to have you with us today. This workshop aims to equip African reviewers with the key skills needed to conduct high-quality constructive peer reviews and contribute meaningfully to the scientific community. We are honored to have our esteemed Editor-in-Chief, Peter Hodkinson, Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Pa Forson, and former Editor-in-Chief, Stephen Browns, guiding us through the session. Our program includes a pre-recorded 35-minute presentation, followed by a live 20-minute Q&A segment. And please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. Our editors will answer some questions in the Q&A channel as we go, and others will be discussed during the live Q&A at the end. At the end of the session, we will provide a special code that allows you to claim your certificate of attendance. A recording of the workshop will also be available afterwards for your convenience. Your dedication as reviewers is crucial to advancing emergency medicine across Africa, and your thoughtful evaluations help shape the future of research in this field. I'd now like to invite our editors to say a few words of welcome. Thank you for joining us, and let's begin.
Hi, good day, Peter Hodkinson, and it's great to have you all here. And this webinar is in a response to, firstly, us struggling to find reviewers and to improve the quality of reviews. So we're excited to have you all here, and we hope by the end we're going to have convinced you all to have a go at reviewing, and if you've reviewed before, to improve the quality. Over to you, Pa.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you. And hi, everyone. Thank you for making the time. It's great to see the enthusiasm. And as Peter noted, I think that this is a great opportunity to start a good journey. If you're not a reviewer, excited and keen for us all to learn and to sort of build our capacity. For those who are already reviewers, this is certainly that refresher that you may need. And so please stick to the end, and I'm sure that you will have a good experience. Is Stefan there?
Hi, everybody. So yeah, thanks. Just to echo Peter and Pa. So my name is Stephen Browns, as the previous editor, and I'm really, really fortunate to have been invited to be here today just to see how the journal is growing. And I mean, you guys are the backbone of the journal. It'd be really great if you can learn some of the bits that makes you better at doing the reviewing, or even become reviewers within the journal, so we can take this journal forward. Thank you.
Okay, let me get us started. So during this workshop, we are going to cover why we should peer review, so purposes and the process. We're going to cover an approach to reviewing an article. We're going to cover the ideal review. Then at the end, we're going to have a few tips and polls for you, and we'll finish off with some questions and answers. So as an introduction, I am going to cover specifically the peer review process, who can review, and why we should review. So what is peer review? So peer review places the reviewer with the author at the heart of scientific publishing. Reviewers such as yourself make the editorial process work by examining, scrutinizing and commenting on manuscripts. It's safe to say that without peer review, there is no control in scientific communication. Reviewers are essentially the backbone of the whole process. So why do reviewers review? What is in it for you as a reviewer? So as a reviewer, I can speak for myself, you get the value from mentoring young researchers, the authors that have submitted their work. The enjoyment in reviewing, seeing other people's work, likely within a general interest area of your own. It gives you an awareness of new research and developments before they have even come out to everybody else. It is essential for career development. Reviewing is something that you can put on your curriculum vitae and various other things that helps with promotion. It can also help you with your own research and your own ideas for research. There's an association with journals and editors, perhaps giving you the potential to publish in the same journals which you review, and also perhaps elevating you to the level of editor. And obviously, it helps you to keep updated with the latest developments. So what is the purpose of your efforts? It improves the quality of the published paper. It ensures that previous work is acknowledged, and it determines the importance of findings, assesses the originality and significance of the work, and highlights any omissions in the reference list and the ethics concerned. I can genuinely say from my own experience on publication that my work has always been strengthened and improved through the peer review process. So let's have a look at that process. So the typical process starts when the author submits their article to the journal. At this time, it will go to an editor who will screen the paper. Some of these papers may not make it to review at all and will be rejected after screening for various reasons. If the paper is accepted for review, the paper will come to a reviewer. Usually it will come to more than one reviewer, and usually the journal will require a number of reviewers to provide a review before they make a decision. But once they have done that, the reviews will go to the editor, who will make an assessment of the reviews. At this time, the article can either be rejected or can be sent for revision. Usually, on the first review, the article will go for revision. Once the article has gone through a number of revisions, it will usually be accepted. It can also be rejected at any stage. But as you can see, the reviewers are central to this process as they help with the decision-making process. So reviewers, it is important that you ensure that you review manuscripts in an area of expertise, that you complete the review on time, that you avoid any conflicts of interest, that you do not use the data that's provided in the article that you are reviewing, that you provide an honest and critical assessment, and finally, that you analyze the strengths along with the weaknesses. So this is really important, as you will at times also be an author and you'll expect a timely review for your articles. And we should give to authors what we would want as authors when we review. Similarly, it's really important that we don't always focus on just the weaknesses, but also highlight the strength of the articles to give the review balance. But more on this later. And finally, it's really important to understand that a review document is confidential. The manuscripts are confidential because the data and so remains the exclusive property of the authors. Usually the expectation is that you will destroy any material which you have downloaded as part of your review after the final decision from the editor. Sometimes you may involve a colleague in reviewing an article, and if you do so, it is important that you disclose this to the editor, and this is done in the interest of confidentiality. I will now hand over for a step-by-step approach to a good review. Thank you. It helps the editorial process by making it easier for the editor to understand the content of the manuscript and the quality of the manuscript. If we don't have peer review, we cannot really control this, and it makes it difficult to decide on our quality of the published work. And therefore, reviewers are the backbone of the whole process. So why do reviewers review? So there's something in it for the reviewers as well. So there's a value for mentoring of young researchers. There's a type of enjoyment in reviewing. It's usually because this is something we do in a general area of our interest. There's an awareness of new research, so we can see things before everybody else see them come out. Career development is really, really important. You can add reviews to your CV. And it can also help with your own research ideas, being exposed, especially in your general interest area, to review papers which no one else has seen that help us frame how we would ask research questions. And then, of course, there's an association with the journal and the editors. And we can get updated with latest developments. I will add one to this. It's really, really nice to review a paper and also then to see it published right at the end. So what is the purpose of peer review? So the purpose of peer review is really to improve the quality of the published work. I have published quite a number of times, and I can guarantee you that every single time my paper passed through peer review, that the end result has been much better than what I submitted initially. So it also ensures that previous work is acknowledged. It determines the importance of findings through the scrutiny of peer review. It also assesses the originality and significance of the work. So perhaps other people have done the same work, and how does this work that you are now reviewing, how does that fit into this whole global body of work? Highlights any omissions, not just in the reference list. It says reference lists and ethics and so, but it highlights omissions perhaps in the work itself as well. And this is probably one of the most important things that it does for us as authors, being able to go through the reviewer comments and seeing where there is anything that we were challenged with from a peer review perspective and being able to fill those holes. So the typical peer review process would be an author who submits their article to a journal. The author would have picked the journal for a very specific purpose. Usually it's based on the subject matter, so emergency medicine specifically related to Africa in our context. The journal editor will then screen the paper. There is a process whereby articles that's not suitable, wrong subject matter, can be rejected after the screening process. But in general, papers will then pass to the reviewers. Different journals will have a different number of reviewers that are assigned to a paper. And usually we'd want to have a certain number of reviewers respond before a decision is made by the editor. The editor would then give this information back to the authors who will make revisions, and then this will flow back to the reviewers. The editor can also make a decision after the reviewers have seen the paper to reject the paper, so it goes no further. Usually papers aren't accepted on the first go. In rare occasions it might be, but the most papers that pass through the peer review process, there will be some form of revision, some opportunity for you to improve someone else's work. So reviewers, it is important that you review manuscripts within the area of your expertise. Obviously we can review other papers as well, but if we're not experts in that subject matter, is what our opinion is about that paper really credible? It's really important that you try and complete the review in time. And the best way to explain this is if you are an author who have submitted your paper, how long would you expect to wait for a reviewer to see it? If you keep that in the back of your mind when you're reviewing papers, that it means that you are delivering the same as what an author, if you were an author, would have expected. So important to avoid conflicts of interest. Sometimes papers will cross will cross your email or your inbox. That poses a conflict of interest. These could be various things. You may know the authors, you may work with the authors, or it may be a subject which you have you've had interest in and done some work in, and there's overlap in the research. So we don't use the data that is provided, obviously, in the papers, and we provide an honest and critical assessment of what we see in front of us. And we do this by analyzing strengths and weaknesses. So manuscripts in this format are confidential documents. It contains data, it contains information which no one else has seen except for the author and the editor up until that point. It remains the property of the authors. Usually, the expectation is that once a decision has been made by the editor, that the reviewer will destroy any of this information that is still with them. So any shared responsibility for the review of the manuscript with a colleague must be disclosed to the editor. So in essence, what this means is if the review is coming to yourself and you are asking another colleague to share the responsibility for that review, so that is a colleague that has not specifically been asked by the editors to do the review, then you must disclose this to the editors. And that brings us to the next section.
Stephen, thank you very much for the very good intro. I'm now going to walk us through step-by-step approach to what a good review should be like, and just show us how to do this. Right, so for general impressions, the first thing you want to do is to have a quick look at the whole manuscript. What's general comprehension of the manuscript? You could do a very quick review, read through it, check the language, the style, the grammar. Those are some of the things that will quickly hit you, and you probably will take a note of them. Look at the structure, and always it's important that you are abreast with what AfJEM's requirements for manuscripts are like, and that would really guide you into being a very good reviewer as far as the structure is concerned. And then, of course, what's also important is your general level of enthusiasm. It's always good to be in that mood, shall I say a good mood, for you to be able to do a very good review. It's also good to look out for the abstracts. Is it included in the first place? Is it really a real summary of the paper? Does it contain the key highlights, or is it not too appropriate? Remember that AfJEM, we have our limits for abstract and number of words for the full manuscript as well, and you want to also look out for that is being followed. This is really a quick systematic approach to review, and I always like to use this as a guide, and I'll just walk through this quickly. And so it's always important to look at the writing. Is it English? Is it clear and concise English? Often you will find that we may have authors who may not have English as their first language, and so you would want to look out for that. Certainly we have platforms to support with improving writing, but it's always good to look at that. What's the title? Is it specific? Does it reflect what the whole manuscript is about? I talked about the abstract. Is it really a good summary? And then really you want to also take some time to really pay attention to the methodology. Is it fully explained? Is it relevant to the study? Does it really capture how the study was done? And then, of course, the figures justified. Is it clear with font? The sizes of the figures, are they proportionate? And then you want to also have a look at the tables as well to be sure that nothing has been omitted. A discussion really is a discussion around the findings of the study, and you want to be sure that it relates to the aims of the study and how the results were generally generated. And of course, our conclusion is more or less a mixed pot of the implications of the results and how it applies to the broader research context. It shouldn't necessarily be a summary of your findings. It should really be a well churned out conclusion that relates the results to what really the body of knowledge out there is like. And then certainly look out for trade names, abbreviations, symbols, were they used appropriately, were they used in context, and of course your references are also very important. You want to also spend a bit of time to be sure that references are appropriate and these references really reflect work that was done as has been captured in the manuscript. So let's look at our introduction. Basically, you want to know whether it is clear, well organized. Does it really introduce the paper or the manuscript? The contents really significant to what the author seeks to communicate? We often advise that the introduction is not too long and too heavy, but straight to the point always works. And in giving feedback, it's always advisable that for the reviewer, you do not just give a blanket, the authors have not done a good job, but really speak specifically to what the issues are and what you have found that you want them to deal with. The methodology is, as I've noted, for me, an important part, and from my experience, is one of the parts that I really want to ensure that I peruse and ensure that this really is what they seek to communicate. Why? Because your methods more or less seek to generate the results that they communicate. Additionally, you want to be sure that another colleague would be able to take this paper and reproduce the experiment and get similar outcomes. So that the authors include necessary references to previously published methodology, sample size large enough. Of course, in our manuscript, we don't expect you to demonstrate or show or write out the sample size, but you want to, through their description, find that if this was done well, was data collected in accordance with accepted practice. These are the things that you want to review. Your results and discussion basically is an important body because they are telling you that after they did the experiment, this is what they found. And then the discussion more or less communicates how this relates to work that has been done either in the past or how it also relates to practice. So you want to ensure that as you review, you suggest improvements in the way the data is shown for the results, and then also comment on the general logic and justification, and even sometimes how data is interpreted. You know, data can be turned around in several ways, but you want to be sure that really it follows and it is rational. You want to, in your comments to your authors, write concisely and precisely which changes you recommend. The goal is not to write them or teach them how to write their results or discuss or write a whole discussion for them, but really point the key areas to look out for. And then finally, by the time you're at your discussion, you should be asking yourself, having looked at the introduction, the methods, results, and then the discussion, is this manuscript really worthy for publication? And generally, the idea is whether there's something important. Is there scientific evidence? Are they adding to the body of knowledge? Is this something that's going to be useful for practice? Is this something that can be reproduced by another scientist somewhere? When it gets to the conclusion, as I've noted, your conclusion should not necessarily summarize the study. Your abstract is really meant for that. But you want to comment on the conclusion, look at the importance or the validity or the generality of the conclusions that they're stating. Sometimes it's always useful to request that they tone down on the language, because sometimes some authors can be very categorical and very confident about their findings and their scientific imputations, and you want to be sure that they do not go out of reach. And of course, it's always useful even around the conclusions to also look out for redundancies. There's sometimes there's too much verbiage and you don't need all of that there. It must be concise, but it must not be a repetition of the abstract. An important part that I also want to reference, and sometimes I think that reviewers will miss, is your references, your tables and figures. Please check the accuracy, the number and appropriateness of the citations. There are various ways you can sort of ensure that this citation or this reference that has been quoted, it's indeed what it is, and it's also appropriate where it has been cited. Your tables and figures, their quality, their readability, the sizes, it's always important to have that review and provide feedback to your authors. Of course, comment on any footnotes that they may have added. And then, of course, look at the legends, headers. They are all important aspects, the axis labels for tables and figures that they may have. And of course, sometimes the color of figures and all of that. Generally, it's important that we check the presentation, that it is consistent all through. And this will be important feedback that you give to your authors. At this point, I'll hand over to Peter.
Right, thanks for that, Pa. I'm going to talk us through some reviewer tips and pearls, what the ideal review looks like from our perspective, and then some tips from experienced reviewers that we've collected. So firstly, from an editor's viewpoint, what makes a good reviewer? So we need an objective, thorough, and comprehensive report. And that's not always easy. You're always going to have your own bias and your own opinion. But what we need is you to try and sit back and be objective. You need to provide some well-founded comments for authors. So it needs to be constructive, and they need to be able to act on your comments. If you make very high-level comments and suggest another study, it's going to be difficult for them to implement. And at the end of that, we need a clear recommendation. And as Stefan has alluded, the recommendations are usually either to reject, major revisions, minor revisions, or to accept. And that needs to sync with what you've written in your text. And then finally, we need timeliness. The journal works on rapid turnover. And when reviewers take too long, that ticks them off the good reviewer list. So it comes back to what Stefan has said, that the enterprise depends on the quality and integrity of reviewers. I thought this was useful. This is some work that I've picked up, and again, overlapping with a lot of what I've said. What we want from the ideal reviewer is timelines. And remember, timelines, as AfJEM is set up at the moment, we invite you to review and you accept. And then there's, I think, 7 days. And then we give you another 7 days to accept the review. And then after that is 14 days to do the review. And if you start adding all these periods up, it's something like 30 days to turn the review in. So ideally, we'd like less than that, and most experienced reviewers will tell you just do it when you first get it and it's done. We need courtesy. There's no room for really over critiquing what authors have done. Just remember the level of work and input they've put in, and remember for yourself just how hard it is to take that criticism of what you've done. Be constructive, as I've said, and make sure that they can fix what you suggest. We don't need to make you experts, but you need to have some idea of the scope of the journal so that you can guide what the journal and the journal's audience takes. So, for example, if someone submits a case study or a proposal to AfJEM and we don't take those, hopefully the editor will have picked that up before it gets to you as a reviewer. But if we don't, you need to be aware and know the sort of guidelines and size and shape of an AfJEM article. We'd like you to be prepared to re-review. When you put a decision of major revisions out, it really sets you up to re-review once the authors fixed that. And we know that's a sort of cumbersome step, and sometimes you don't want to see it again, but it really makes life quite hard for the journal when we have to find another set of reviewers for the second round, and they may feel differently to you and bring in new viewpoints, and that's when we get to revision 4, 5, 6, because the reviewers just can't agree. So ideally, we'd like you to re-review. So think about it up front. Only agree to review when you can. If you say yes, and then you don't get to it, and you don't get to it, you're delaying our whole process and actually throwing us out. So if you say yes, you need to follow through. And that aligns with the next one. Don't agree and then disappear. And unfortunately, it happens. We all get to that. But if you can't do it anymore, then it's easy enough to just get onto the system and say, I won't be able to do this, or email someone directly. Be consistent. We sometimes find that a reviewer, there's a box, comments to the editor and your decision to the editor, and then there's another box with your comments to the author. Don't say under the decision to the editor, this is a terrible article, I don't think we should go any further. And then under the author, you put a page of reasonable comments and make it sound like it can be fixed. They need to sync. Confidentiality, Stefan mentioned. Remember that you can't share the submission, however excited you are about it, or however bad it is. You want to use it in your teaching, or you can't share it with anyone. That's part of the role of the reviewer. And finally, and we've all alluded to this, is don't be the copy editor. It's not your job to point out the full stops and the spelling issues. If there's a lot of them, just say this needs proofreading. Please pay attention to the punctuation, but don't go in and point out line by line, this is what you need to fix. We're looking for bigger picture reviews from you. So I hope that's helpful. What I thought I would do is just pick from the vast array of AfJEM reviews I've got to pull out and show you what I think a good and a bad review look like. And I've tried to anonymize these. I hope no one picks up one that they've done. I'm showing you this, it's quite small print, so you'll struggle to read it, but just to give you some sort of idea of the size and scale of what a decent review looks like. And it's quite small print, so it's hard to scale. But if you look at this review, it starts with a kind of general view. This is what I think of it overall. This is what it says. Then this one has major comments. Some people like to do it like that. Others will do it in another format. I'll show you the next one. But one way of doing a review is start with major comments. And these are the major problems that they need to fix. And then lower down, they've got minor comments. And here you can see a minor comment, as I've just said, was please review English and grammar. I think this is a reasonable size review. You can break it up as an author. If this came back to you, you could easily kind of turn this into a table and bullet points and respond to each one that this is reasonable, and I've done that, and we've thought about this. So I like that. As an editor, this would seem a constructive review. Another one, and I'm showing it to you because it's a slightly different format. Possibly a commoner format that many of our reviewers use. And again, there's a kind of introductory paragraph. This is what it did. I like it because of that. And then they've gone into the introduction. This is what they like and don't like about the introduction, things to fix. The methods, I'm concerned about the sample size, quantitative methods, follow-up. And then there's results, then there's discussion. So they've broken it up into the different sections of the article and given a few points on each. So I like that one as well. I can see that the reviewer has been right through and has given some constructive advice. I think that's useful for the author to go back and fix, and also useful for the editors. At a glance, I can see this as someone who's been thorough and been through it. So now I hate to criticize our reviewers because our reviewers work for free and do it for the good of the science, but I feel like it's useful to show you some bad reviews. My opinion, bad reviews. So the first one I'm showing you here, and I've just taken a little screenshot of a very long review, is someone who's actually used a PDF or some sort of document editor and made comments. And look at the sort of scale of their comments. They've said grammar. They've said this sentence does not introduce the reader. Please rephrase. For me, this is going to be a long review and over detailed. And I feel like that's a reviewer who's going into supervisor mode. And it's easy for those of us who are academics and supervise all the time or teach. I think that's too much detail, and it's going to lead to giving the authors, intimidating them. And often we find our authors don't come back when they get a review with this level of critique. And someone experienced will be able to look at this and say, it's not that bad. You can deal with all this, but especially for a junior author, this is going to put them off. So try and stay away from too much detail. The second one, if you look at that, firstly, it's quite short. It's basically one paragraph. And I feel that that's really just the reviewer summarizing and given their opinion on the topic. So it hasn't really given critique to the author and to the study. It's sort of said nice things about it. It's summarized what it does, but there's nothing in here that the authors can act on. It's just a nice summary and opinion, and that's not constructive. It doesn't really help. It doesn't tell you anything to do. And I can also tell you that this didn't sync, because you would think from reading this that the reviewer loves it, but they didn't say accept. They said revisions. So there's the sort of flaw. They said revisions, but they didn't say what. Another two bad reviewers. The one on the left, I think is too short and too much of an overview. So they've said, thanks for the study, just highlighting a few query suggestions. And there are basically 4 bullet points. But my problem with this is I feel like it's a bit brief. And it doesn't quite sync, because they've pointed out some quite major issues in their 4 bullet points, although they look small, and their decision was accept. So accept for me means an article is perfect, and if a reviewer says, if 2 reviewers say accept, then we like it and we're going to accept. But when a reviewer says accept, but there's still problems like this, then it doesn't sync. So that's the problem. I think it's a bit brief, and the sync is not right. The last one, that for me at a glance is just says to me that this reviewer didn't really bother and really didn't read the whole study and made a quick scan of it, probably read the abstract, and said, go for it. Well, for me, the text says go for it, but then the decision was major revisions. So it just doesn't sync it. They've kind of sat on the fence and said revise, but they haven't said how. So I hope those give you some insight. It's a tough one, getting the balance between too much and too little. At this stage, I'm going to say a quick word about dealing with review, because remember, this is something you have to keep in the back of your head when you are the reviewer, is when it comes back to you as an author. It can be really quite cutting to get someone else's comments and critique of your life's work. So you need to stay calm. You need to read and reread the comments, digest them a little bit, talk to others. You're allowed to discuss what someone said, especially within the team, and then start making a table which details every comment. And again, as we say for reviewers, an author dealing with review needs to be polite, be thorough, and answer with the evidence. So I feel like that's A, for all of us as authors, useful, but B, for you when you're doing your review. Think about the author getting it and how they're going to feel and how they're going to be able to respond.
Right. Thank you, Peter. That was really great. So here I'm just going to share some pearls that would help us as reviewers. As you review, remember that reviewing keeps you active by reading articles of interest. Articles that are in your interest area. It widens your breadth of review, and so it keeps you active. It helps also when reviewers also submit manuscripts to AfJEM, because then at the end of the day, you are adding to the body of science. We are learning from your experience, but then also it sharpens you because you also know what is required. As reviewers, my advice is be objective, but be nice. And I think Peter has said this, but sometimes reviewers in being objective can go a bit overboard. And remember that some authors are young, authors in their early in their career, that can break them. Reviewing is a mentorship process. So see these authors as your mentees and not really as foes. We want to also advise that when you are starting to review, read the submission, allow time to simmer and really digest what you are reading, think about it a bit more before you start to put pen to paper. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Pa. Okay, my 4 pearls are firstly, reflect a bit, consider the aim, the study design, the methods, and then the main outcomes, and think about them and assess whether the conclusions made are aligned with those. Are they overcalling it? Are they overinterpreting it? Or does the evidence back what they've said in the conclusions? Because that's often a flaw in papers that we see, and probably the commonest thing that we as reviewers and editors have to realign the authors to. Secondly, don't spend too long on a review. Although we've said you should read and then think about it, when you actually get down to reviewing, it shouldn't take you more than 1 or 2 hours. It's the authors and the supervisors that should be spending ages and fixing the fine points. For you, it's a quick, bigger picture look. On the same point, it's not your job to rewrite the paper. Just point out the strengths and weaknesses. And finally, what I've already alluded in my good and bad reviews is your decision must be in alignment with your review text. Otherwise, that throws us as editors. When we get one reviewer says accept and the other says major revisions, it leaves us sitting on the fence. And usually that's when we'd have to invite a third and sometimes a fourth reviewer, and things gets prolonged and adds indecision. So back your decision with what you've said in the text. Okay, so I want to give you some further reading. There's a lot of information and resources on the Elsevier platform. There's the Elsevier Reviewer Hub, which talks you through the actual peer review process, the role of a reviewer, effective peer reviewing, and gives you lots of reading and insights. And then the other place where some of our reviewers and certainly first-time reviewers struggle is dealing with our platform, which is called Editorial Manager. And there's good resources there, especially for your first time reviewing. Go and look at that. It tells you how to deal with the review process, how to log in, how to enter it, and how to make your decision and so on if you're struggling at all, because it's not completely intuitive the first time. And then there's a whole lot more reading. Look around at the Researcher Academy, and it will not only help you with the review process, but publishing, ethics, getting going on the academic pathway. So yeah, thank you. That will take us to the question and answers.
Great. Thank you again, Peter, for sharing. And now, any questions or comments? I have seen quite a few really good questions in the Q&A. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping Pa was going to take the question on gauging the enthusiasm of the author.
Yes. Yes. So maybe I'll take that quickly, and then maybe I'll try to steer the questions for you and Stefan. But yes, Carol, thank you very much for that question. Really, enthusiasm of the author or the research. Basically, it's you, the reviewer, gauging your clear interest in the article or manuscript that you are being asked to review. Of course, for an author to put out some work, they have clear interest and must be excited that they want to share this with the scientific community. And so that you can be sure about. But it's often, and this is my personal experience, if the topic or the title is something that, of course, one is not clearly around the area of my research interest, that takes quite a bit of effort if I have to. And sometimes you'll also find that it's not really in your area of research. You may probably know very little to nothing. And so stretching yourself to do such a review may not be fair on that author or authors who have put together that manuscript that they want to share with the scientific society. So it's important generally to gauge your own interest, pick and be sure that this is something I want. And that, as I noted, the more you review, the more you build your breadth or you widen your breadth on the areas of interests and things that excite you, things that you want to dig in further. And so really, I think that it's important that you have some enthusiasm, and you, of course, note and declare that you have some time to spare to do this. That will be my answer, Carol. Thank you. Peter, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you. So we were expecting some kind of question on the use of AI. Stefan, I think, is probably the one of us who has the most insight and experience there. And I hand that to you.
I don't know why you would say that. No, yeah. So I think AI is tricky. I think it's a developing space. Vanessa, you shared an article before the meeting with all of us. It might be good to put that in the chat for people to see. So it's an article that's written by a number of people that either works for Elsevier or with Elsevier, who's kind of written their opinions on the use of this. And I think we're having two conversations. One is, should we put AI into writing our articles? And now we're asking, should we get AI to review our articles? So we end up in a circular position where we've got AI writing our articles and reviewing it. And it's about things that concerns humans and care that we provide to humans, emergency care in this case. So I think there's that one argument. The other one is if you work with AI enough, you'll understand that it can be wrong, and it's quite often wrong in a way that you don't realize, because they hallucinate very, very well. I use AI quite a lot for the current role that I hold, and the only way that I use it is as an assistant. So I use it for some preliminary investigative stuff to kind of steer me in a direction, kind of, I guess, in the way you'd use a calculator if you want to do your books. And so, you could add it up with your fingers, or you can use a calculator, but the calculator is not doing my budget at the end of the day. I am doing my budget using a calculator. And I think AI in that way is probably where it's most useful. And you need to be aware that it will hallucinate. Articles quite often contain novel information, like we have said. So you've got an AI that has to give an interpretation of information that it's not seen before. And then there is an aspect of confidentiality. There's not many of the tools that will keep your what you submit to it confidential. So many of the tools like ChatGPT, and so as soon as you start entering into a chat, it'll use what you put in the chat for its own learning. So that information then ends up not being that confidential because it's used to teach the algorithm for the agent. There are some which is confidential that is probably more useful in this way. But so I think AI is probably more a watch this space. But I think, I've written many articles, and I can guarantee you I put an enormous amount of effort into each of those articles. And then to have to think that at the back end, somebody has just fed it into something that spits out an answer within seconds, it kind of feels a little bit insulting. So the reason we ask you to be reviewers is because we feel that you are expert reviewers, you understand the subject matter, and that you can tease these things apart. And I think we can't stop you to use AI, but I think if you're going to use it, you need to be aware that there are some limitations to these tools. And at the end of the day, we want your opinion. We don't want a string of zeros and ones stick together.
Thanks, Stefan. Okay. So the next question, which I think is a useful one, is probably the selection criteria for a reviewer. So there are no very clear-cut criteria. For me personally, I would say you have to have been an author and published yourself before. I think if you haven't been through that process, you're going to struggle a little. So that would be the baseline for me. But I think if you've published before or been involved in it, there's nothing to stop you. I've heard responses that you need a master's, you need this, you need to have supervised. We would very much encourage junior reviewers to get going. This is not life and death stuff. You're not standing at the side of the patient here. There are various safety nets. We have an associate editor and an editor who are going to look at your reviews and gauge them. And if we see one review is out of sync with the others, or too thin or too thick, we'll look at the other reviews. And if still conflicting, we'll ask for more reviewers. So there's really nothing to lose, and we'd encourage junior reviewers to get in. You're going to get good. You're going to start slow. So yeah, I'd say if you've published yourself, then we're open to reviewing. And just now we will post the website and the QR code for where you can register as a reviewer on the Elsevier website. And if you add your interest areas and your your topic areas, then that will help us. When we're looking for reviewers, it will find the topic areas, and we'll definitely get you going. So I hope that answers that one. We'll leave that up there for a while. The other question I've seen is dealing with reviewing an article of an author you know. Stefan, do you want to take that, or I can?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Peter. So you will find that, especially for AfJEM, we will, for you as a reviewer, I mean, the ethics about it, generally, when authors are submitting, we give them the option of suggesting reviewers, and that makes sense, because you will find that you may probably be, based on the topic or the area, then maybe people you think may be able to support to review your work. And we do take that, but generally you would also want to ensure that there's reasonability in the review and not just checking to say it's okay just because I know that person. And so really for us, the ethics around it is just ensuring that if you are going to review this and generally you have been a part of the work, or then of course it already compromises you. You may probably be biased. It's not always the case. And so in as much as that could happen, we do not, we are not against it, but I think that it also is useful, and reviewers are given the option to say, probably I know this work, I've been part of it, or I have a sense of it, and so you can decide that someone else reviews this work. And I think that that's only fair. It is not a no-no, I think, but generally you also, as an author, would want someone to do a very good, thorough review of your work, because for me, I think that the whole idea about peer reviewing is not to just get someone to just take and say it's okay, but to really get the community of scientists making inputs that would improve the work and its output, but generally also give you personal feedback as you develop yourself going forward. What about you, Peter?
Yeah, if I can just add to what Pa was saying, emergency medicine is a small field, and it's almost inevitable that you will know some of the authors. So you've really got to gauge personally whether there is a conflict and whether you are able to give an objective review, or whether your knowledge of the topic and the research and the reviewer is going to bias you. I feel like I interrupted you, Stefan, did I?
No, I was going to say the same. I think this is sort of more a reviewer thing. If you recognize an article, recognize the work, or recognize a person, you feel that it will impact on the quality of the review that you give for whatever reason, then you should just reject to do the review. I think so. That's integrity of the reviewer. And we kind of do trust you. We're all grown-ups, professionals, really. So yeah, so it's all of those things. It is a small field, and you know, we do try and give reviews in such a way that we don't enter conflict of interest, but that's very difficult in a small field. So really it's onto the reviewer. So it's not that you must do it if it arrives at your desk. If you sort of have a little voice in the back of your head that says, I might not be that unbiased when I do this, then just tell the editor.
So the next question that's come up, which I think is a really useful one, is do we get feedback if we submit a bad review? Now, firstly, I feel bad that I've introduced this concept of a bad review. I feel like I've labeled that, and my examples have said that there are such things as bad reviews. There there are early reviews and there's developing reviews. Maybe I should have rephrased it like that, because any review is better than nothing. So we don't directly give you feedback, but the feedback that you do get is that when a decision is made on an article, then you get copied in on the response to the author. And in being copied on, you'll see what the other reviewers said. And that's usually quite useful feedback for you. And you'll immediately gauge whether you were in sync with what the other reviewers said. Did you say the same things? Were you too harsh? Were you too gentle on it? And that's the way most reviewers would learn, I'd say. To add to that. Yeah.
The only thing I'd say is that sometimes you get quite experienced authors who does developing reviews, yeah. So I don't think you should frame yourself as, oh, I'm a starter. Quite often what we see is that beginner reviewers actually do incredibly thorough reviews. It's very detailed reviews, almost over detailed. And as people get a little bit more relaxed in what they do, is the reviews get shorter and shorter and shorter. Yeah.
Definitely. Good point. Anything else? I feel like we've answered most of the questions you posted.
I think someone asked if we ever get a feedback for a review or a developing review.
I
mean, like, do reviewers get a feedback?
Yeah, I think when I was editor, we didn't do that. But every now and again, somebody would email me and say, look, how was that? And then I would give honest feedback about that. So I don't want to introduce that for yourself and for Peter and so, but I mean, you can always email the editor if you really want to know about the quality of your review. But quite often, like Peter said, it's enough when you get the decision back and you can see the other person's review. I must say that's how I learned mostly how to review. Back when I started, there wasn't all these workshops and seminars and stuff. I kind of did the best I could, and then I read what the other reviewer did, and then I adjusted myself based on that. So you can get quite a lot out of that. But if that still doesn't satisfy you, I mean, yeah, I quite often got emails from reviewers who said, was that okay? Was that good enough? Yeah.
And it can be quite satisfying and validating when you see someone else has reviewed and pointed out exactly the same things as you. Then you know you're on track. I think it is 3 o'clock and we've answered all the questions. You're very welcome to contact us directly. You can find a contact through the journal website. Would welcome any further discussion. And we apologize again for the initial playback. Poor old Stefan, you just heard his voice a couple of times. We'll clean that up a bit when we put a recording out of this, so you can watch him a third time if you want to. Yeah, Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was a really great Q&A, and thank you for the great questions to our participants. If you want to claim your certificate of attendance for today's webinar, you can use this QR code, but you will also need the claim code EPCGTC as typed here in orange. You have to enter that, and then you can download a certificate that will look roughly like the example at the bottom of the slide. So congratulations and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank everyone for your time, and we look forward to seeing your reviews.